for the chance to be together again.
Data twongeye kugushima kongeye kuduhuza uyu munsi.
And like I always say, we need you to be our teacher.
Kuko duhora tubivuga dukeneye wewe ngo tubere umwarimu.
I am just another man, I'm just another sinner.
Ndumuntu ndumunyabyaha nk'abandi bose.
All of us need you to be teaching us.
Twese turagukeneye kugira ngo twigishe.
And to protect us and encourage us.
Uturinde udukomeze.
And to make sure we have understood and believed the gospel.
Kandi dushoboze kugira ngo twizere ubutumwa bwiza.
So that we will have salvation and eternal life.
Kugira ngo tubashe kugira agakiza tugira ubugingo buhoraho.
And your truth is how we know to connect with you and know your way.
Binyuze mu kuri kwawe niho tubasha kumenya inzira yawe cyangwa se tumenya agakiza.
So we need you to teach us.
Turagukeneye kugira ngo twigishe.
And we need you to let us have a nice time with you and each other.
Turagukeneye kugira ngo duheze ibihe byiza.
And I believe you will do that.
Kandi twizeye kuri bubukore.
So I say thank you in Jesus' name.
Turavuze ngo asande mu izina rya Yesu.
Amen.
Amen.
Thanks everybody for coming. Felix came while I was praying, so you're an answer to prayer.
Felix ajubunyine turakuyegereje kandi uri igisubizo cy'amasengesho.
Okay, now because of the rain, we get a little bit later start today. We will almost finish Colossians today. It might go into next week a little bit, and then we'll start Hebrews next week.
Twatangiye isomo ryacu dutinze kubera imvura yaguye, ariko byari gushoboka ko turangiza Abakolosayi uyu munsi, ariko wenda igice gitoya dushobora kuzagisoza muri kira cyumweru gitaha.
So I want to repeat chapter 2 verse 18.
Ndashaka gusubira mu Bakolosayi igice cya 2 n'umurongo wa 18.
We had just started that verse last time.
Kuko ubushize niho twagarukiye tuganira.
And that verse 18 and 23 I think are maybe the two important verses in Colossians about religion.
Iyi mirongo wa 18 kugeza kwa 23 mu Bakolosayi, iyo ni mirongo y'ingenzi cyane ishaka y'ingenzi kuri twebwe buryo dushobora gusobanukirwa tukamenya ibintu bijanye n'idini.
So in 2:18 Paul writes, let no one keep on cheating you of your prize.
Tuyakagire umuntu bafusa ingororano zanyu.
And that prize is not heaven. These are already believers, they're already going to heaven, but it's rewards at the judgment seat of Christ.
Izi ngororano zivugwa ntabwo ari ukuja mu ijuru, ahubwo abanabizera bari bamaze kwizera, ahubwo ingororano babigwaga nizaha imbere y'urubanza rwa Kristo.
And as I've said before, I think the theme or the subject of Colossians is religion.
Kuko nabivuze mbere ku isomo ryo mu Bakolosayi ari rivuga hejuru y'idini.
And religion is the opposite of the gospel. The gospel is Jesus and the cross.
Kandi tuzi ko idini ari ikinyuranyo cy'ubutumwa bwiza, ubutumwa bwiza n'umusaraba ni Yesu.
So religion is things we do. The gospel is what Jesus already did and continues to do.
Ubutumwa bwiza nico Yesu yamaze gukora, ariko idini nico umuntu akora kugeza uyu munsi.
Now, in the perfect situation, the church would have no religion inside it. In a perfect situation, the church would have no religion inside it.
Mu buryo busanzwe itorero ntigakagombye kuba rifite idini,
because religion is what we do.
Kuko idini nico dukora twebwe abantu.
And what we do blocks what God is doing.
Icyo dukora kizacimira kigakingiriza ikimana yakora cyangwa se kibasha gukora.
And religion goes back to the Garden of Eden where Satan said to Hawa, you can be like God.
Idini rikagenda rikagaruka mu ngobyi ya Edeni aho Satani yaje akabwira Adamu na Eva ngo mwomera nk'Imana.
So religion is at least partly based on the belief I can be like God, which means I can do truly good things and I might be able to save myself.
Idini ni igitekerezo kibwira umuntu ngo womera nk'Imana, ushobora gukora ikintu cyiza cyangwa se ushobora gukora neza.
So the whole book of Colossians is emphasizing what we do, which is called flesh or religion, is useless from God's side.
Ni ukuvuga ngo Abakolosayi bashimangira cyane bavuga ngo icyo umuntu abasha gukora idini cyangwa se nicyo cyitwa kandi ngo flesh cyangwa se umubiri nta mumaro bifite, nta gaciro bifite, n'ubusa.
But it's even worse than useless because it blocks us from seeing and believing the truth, which is Jesus of the gospel.
Kandi si ukuvuga ngo nta gaciro gusa gifite, ni ubusa, ntacyo kimaze kuko kimira kigatwikira kubona Imana icyo twebwe twibwira twakora.
So the rest of Colossians is talking about self-denial. I refuse some things for myself and it kind of like punishes myself.
Abakolosayi rero bagakomeza bagenda bavuga amagambo yo kwiyima, kwibuza, kwibabaza.
That's what Jesus did on the cross. He denied himself. He said, I will sacrifice myself for others. So religion says we have to do a little bit of that also.
Ni ukuvuga ko icyo Yesu yakoze ku musaraba yariyanze, niwe wiyanze, ariko twebwe mu idini tugashaka kwabo natwe twogerageza tukiyanga cyangwa se tukibuza ibi n'ibi.
So religion has all different kinds of self-righteousness.
Idini rifite gukiranuka ku buryo butandukanye.
Rather than the gift of righteousness that your brother, I guess, was preaching about.
Bitandukanye no gukiranuka duheshwa no kwizera umuvandimwe wa pastor yari maganira ni.
So religion says try your best and your righteousness might get you to heaven.
Ugerageze gukiranuka kwawe birashoboka ko uzokugeza mu ijuru.
But the New Testament says my righteousness will get me to hell, but Jesus' gift of righteousness will get me to heaven.
Gukiranuka kwanje k'umuntu kunjana muri gehinomu, ariko gukiranuka mpeshwa na Yesu Kristo niko kunjana mu ijuru.
Now, there's three different ways to describe this fake righteousness.
Hari uburyo nka butatu bwo kuvuga uku gukiranuka kwa fake.
So we call it sometimes self-righteousness.
Rimwe na rimwe tubyita ngo gukiranuka kwa muntu.
But we can also call it flesh righteousness because flesh represents me, the best I can do. But flesh means me pretending to be God. Flesh means me pushing the gospel and God's gift on the side, and I try to do it by things I do.
Bisobanura ngo nugushira Imana ku ruhande ukayigizayo, wowe ukagerageza kuzana ibyo ushobora gukora ukemera ibyo wewe.
So self-righteousness is also flesh righteousness.
Gukiranuka kwa muntu nugukiranuka k'umubiri,
but it's also religious righteousness. It's all the same.
Gukiranuka kandi twaheza izina gukiranuka kw'idini.
And that's what Islam is. Religious righteousness, but it will get people to hell. But sadly, many churches are more about religious flesh righteousness than they are about the righteousness by faith.
Ikibabaje nuko n'itorero abenshi bafite gukiranuka kwa muntu k'umubiri gutandukanye no gukiranuka duheshwa no kwizera.
And this is what Colossians is trying to protect us from.
Abakolosayi rero nico bagaragaza kudusobanura ngo twirinde bene uko gukiranuka kw'abantu.
So we have said before that flesh means human thinking instead of God's truth.
Umubiri gukiranuka kwa muntu nuko umuntu atekereza bitandukanye nuko Imana itekereza.
And human goodness, but the Bible says none of us are good.
Cyangwa se ubwiza bw'umuntu, ibyiza by'umuntu, kuko Bibiliya ibihamya neza ikavuga ngo nta mwiza n'umwe.
And human power to control ourselves so that we don't sin and we do good things so that we can lift ourselves to heaven.
N'imbaraga umuntu ashobora kwibwira ko afite imbaraga zishobora gutuma yaba mwiza cyangwa se agakora neza zikaba zanamuhesha ubushobozi.
But now one of the main things that Colossians teaches is about the human will, which is also part of flesh.
Icyo rero Abakolosayi baza gushimangira nahanga havuga ngo ubushake bw'umuntu cyangwa se gukora k'umuntu guhitamo k'umuntu.
Okay, so then he says make sure that you don't allow anybody to cheat you of your prize by delighting in self-abasement. That is the flesh sacrificing the flesh.
ntihakagire umuntu ubavutsa ingororano zanyu azibavukishije kwihindura kwicisha bugufi.
So instead of Jesus sacrificing himself, religion says we sacrifice ourselves. And there's many different ways.
aho kugira ngo twemere igitambo cya Yesu Kristo wiyanze ku bwacu, idini ryo rikanga rikaba ngo natwe ubwacu dukwiye kwiyanga kugira ngo tugire icyo tubona.
So by self-abasement or self-sacrifice and the worship of angels.
Kubw'uko gushaka guca bugufi ndetse no kugerageza kwihindura kubicisha bugufi ngo no gusenga abamarayika.
But now I just introduced last week that phrase, the worship of angels, which is part of the flesh religion. It can be translated 4 different ways.
Navuze hejuru y'uku kuramya abamarayika cyangwa se twebwe bavuze gusenga abamarayika bivuga ko mu buryo nkabune ariko nabwo bifite ubusobanuro bwo gukora kuri.
So the people that are very strong believers in the flesh religion, they like to translate it the worship of angels.
Abantu benshi bashimangira idini cyangwa se bari mu idini baza bakunda kuzita ngo nukuramya abamarayika.
So worship is something you do. It's an action or a good work.
Kuramya ni umurimo cyangwa se ni igikorwa umuntu abasha gukora.
And it's about angels, so we don't have to worry so much about that. That's the angels' problem. Because it's worship of angels, it's not a big thing for us because it's about the angels. Okay, it might mean people worship angels, but it can also mean the worship that angels do.
Abantu bashobora kuramya abamarayika cyangwa se bakanaramya n'ibyo abamarayika babasha gukora.
But last week I mentioned, and if you have a question about this, I'll show you in the Greek lexicon, the Greek dictionary, probably a better way to translate the Greek word is religion.
Ubushize nabaye ijambo ry'ikigiriki risobanura idini.
So religion is more about the teaching and more about the belief.
Idini cyane cyane rivuga hejuru y'imyizerere,
about teaching and belief. So worship is something you do. Religion is something that you're taught and you believe. You believe that my sacrifice will work or Jesus' sacrifice will work.
Idini ni ukwizera yuko igitambo ushobora gutamba gishobora gukora umurimo cyangwa se igitambo cya Yesu Kristo ko aricyo kibasha gukora umurimo.
Now that Greek word is threskeia. You don't really need to know that, but we're going to see the same word in verse 23. So I want you to see the Greek connection between verse 18 and 23.
Turaza kubibona mu murongo wa 18 n'uwa 23 aho bakoresheje ijambo kuramya mu kigiriki ngo ni threskeia.
Okay, so I looked in 2 different famous Greek dictionaries, and they give religion as the first definition, but it can also mean worship.
Nabirebye mu madictionnaire nk'abiri ariko baza kubisobanura ko ari uburyo nabwo bw'idini.
So this would mean, what do angels believe about religion and about God?
Iri jambo risobanura icyo abamarayika bizera cyangwa se bazi ku Mana.
Or it can mean what is taught by angels.
Cyangwa se ibyo abamarayika bashobora kwigisha.
Okay, and then the third way to translate it is, instead of angel, it's messenger.
Aho gushobora kuramya abamarayika ni ukuramya intumwa.
So the Greek word that is translated angel actually means messenger more than it does angel.
Ijambo mu kigiriki ryo barisobanura messenger cyangwa se intumwa.
So in Revelation 2:1, in a literal translation, it says, to the messenger of the Ephesian assembly. Revelation 2:1.
Kabiri rimwe havuga the messenger.
Revelation 2:1. Let me explain.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about your translation, but many English translations say, to the angel of the church at Ephesus, but in this literal translation it says to the messenger of the church at Ephesus.
No, for us it says to the church of this. Ibyo yaravuze muri version y'icyongereza iyo bavuga ngo intumwa twebwe ko bavuga ngo wandikire marayika w'itorero, ariko iyo bavuze ngo marayika bavuze ngo intumwa.
So yours does say angel, the angel of the church. Some English ones do.
Muzayishura igice cya kabiri wandikire marayika w'itorero, ariko iyo mu kigiriki bakoresha wandikire intumwa.
Okay, but probably it should mean messenger, not angel.
Bishobora gusobanura cyane intumwa aho kuvuga marayika.
So now it's the religion of a human messenger, a religion taught by human messengers. Who is the source of this teaching?
Nukuvuga ngo nyiri soko cyangwa se wazanye iryo somo ni intumwa y'idini.
Now notice in this verse in Colossians, no matter how you translate it, it's wrong.
Nubwo wasobanura gute uyu murongo kurawusobanura nabi.
So again he says, make sure that nobody cheats you from your prize by self-sacrifice or the worship or religion of angels or human messengers. It's all bad.
Tiyakagire uwose cyangwa se ubashukisha kwicisha bugufi ndetse no kuramya intumwa cyangwa se kuramya marayika.
Now, from what I understand, the two Greek words more accurately are translated religion of messengers.
Uburyo bwiza dushobora kubisobanuramo ni ukuvuga ngo ni idini, ni intumwa y'idini.
The messengers are humans.
Ni ukuvuga ngo intumwa ni abantu.
So the teaching about what you should believe that comes from humans instead of the gospel, which is the truth. So again, all four of these translations are wrong. No matter how it's translated, it's wrong.
Uburyo bwose bune basobanuye bakoresheje ino mirongo kuramya marayika cyangwa se intumwa y'idini babisobanuye mu buryo butari bwo.
Okay, so again, the two ways for us to think is the flesh way, that's religion, or the truth, which is Jesus on the cross.
Uburyo bwiza bwo kubisobanukirwa ni ugutandukanya inzira y'idini no gutandukanya n'inzira y'umusaraba ariyo Yesu.
Okay, now I'm going to give some examples of this later.
Ndaza gutanga ingero hanyuma.
But a religion, a belief system that is taught by human messengers is flesh religion.
Uko idini ryigisha cyangwa se imyigishirize y'idini ni ukuvuga ngo nicyo ryitwa ngo ni idini cyangwa se inyigisho y'idini ni ibyara idini.
And what I should explain that it doesn't mean that every human messenger is teaching a flesh religion, but if it's a religion that comes from human thinking, that is what Colossians is warning this about.
Sinavuga ngo uko umuntu wese yigisha ngo ni idini, ahubwo ibyo umuntu ayigisha zuzuzanya no gukora cyangwa se n'imyizerere yo gukora k'umuntu ni ibyara idini.
So this is pretty dangerous. This is a warning.
Iyi ntumwa y'idini
to be careful
dukwiye kuba maso tukiri
that what you believe about God and heaven and eternity did not start with a human. It started with the true God. It might come through a human, but it's not the human idea.
Dukwiye gutekereza twitonze kandi tukazirinda nukuvuga ngo gutangira kw'idini ntabwo bije gusa vuba, ahubwo bishobora kunyura mu muntu bikaza bitavuye ku Mana bikomotse mu gutekereza.
So back to the first thing he said, self-abasement, self-sacrifice replaces the cross with some kind of a human sacrifice.
Guca bugufi kugira ngo wicisha bugufi birablokinga cyangwa se bitwikira igitambo cyayo.
And that's what religion is all about.
Nico gisobanuro cy'idini.
Every different religion has a different thing that they think is the main sacrifice, but every religion has some kind of a sacrifice that people have to make, and then that replaces the sacrifice of Jesus on the
kandi
cross.
buri dini ryose rifite uburyo rishyiraho ibitambo cyangwa se ibitambo batamba kugira ngo babashe kwemerwa imbere y'Imana.
And then, if people believe that, if they believe the religious system that is taught by human messengers, then the next one here is what happens.
Noneho rero abantu iyo bigishijwe na ya ntumwa y'idini barangiza bakemera ibyo ngibyo nibyo biza kuzara iki kintu kiri aha cyane.
So remember, religion is about belief, but worship is an action. It is a work.
Mwibuke ko idini ari ibijanye n'imyizerere ariko kuramya ni ibijanye n'icyo umuntu akora cyangwa se igikorwa.
So if people are deceived, remember again, it's a warning. If people are deceived by a human messenger, a teacher, so that their religion is based on human thinking, then eventually that will lead to the worship of those human messengers.
Noneho rero niba abantu bigishijwe nabi cyangwa se bakayozwa na ya ntumwa y'idini na kwa kuramya intumwa cyangwa se marayika, nibyo biza kuzara umuntu akaramya intumwa y'idini kandi cyangwa se akaramya umuntu.
These two are a belief
Biriya bitatu
that will keep you from heaven. That will keep you from heaven.
bikubuza kuja mu ijuru.
Or if you are a true Christian, they will keep you from getting rewards at the judgment seat of Christ.
Ariko kandi niba uri n'umukristo byakubuza kugira ingororano hari imbere y'intebe y'urubanza rwawe.
These are works that are done, or an attitude that somebody has, but they are based on what does he believe is the truth.
Imirimo rero cyangwa se iki gikorwa tuhatuba cyo kuramya uza gukora cya nyuma kiraba gitewe n'ibyo wakiri cyangwa se n'imyizerere ufite hariya muri ariya magambo atatu twagiye tuvuga.
So this morning I was listening to some news from my country, and they were talking about the Pope who died 2 days ago.
Mu gitondo naho ntegera amakuru bari bavuga hejuru y'urupfu rwa papa.
Okay, and they mentioned the infallibility of the Pope, which means the Pope doesn't make a mistake.
Bavuga hejuru y'ukuntu papa yari umuntu mwiza nta makosa akora.
Now, I think there are Roman Catholics who have believed the gospel, but I think there's a lot of Roman Catholics that believe in the Pope more than they believe in Jesus.
Bizera ko hariho abaturika bizera ubutumwa bwiza, hakabaho n'abandi baturika bizera papa.
And they kind of like worship the Pope.
Nukuvuga ngo baba bafite ibikorwa bivuze kandi kuramya intumwa cyangwa se kuramya papa.
So then they also mentioned the immaculate conception of Mary.
Baza no kuvuga hejuru yo gusama kwa Mary. Conception of Mary.
Conception means how a baby starts inside.
No gusama kwa Maria.
Okay, and that means Mary is not a sinner.
Bakaba ngo Maria ngo ntabwo ari umunyabyaha.
And so that means Mary is kind of like God also.
Bakaba ati Maria ameze nk'Imana nawe.
So you go into Roman Catholic churches and there's a statue of Mary, but the Old Testament says don't ever make a statue or an image.
Iyo winjiye muri Gatolika uzasanga kiriya gishushanyo nyine kiriho Maria, ariko muri Bibiliya hakaba tukiremere igishushanyo.
So it's easy for us to point to another church and say the Pope and Mary have become like God, and we don't accept that. But in many of our churches also, there is this flesh belief that I can do something myself that at least will help me get to heaven.
Okay, si byiza kuvuga ngo papa cyangwa se Maria ngo nuko bimeze bameze gutya, ariko uko bameze niko natwe tumeze mu matorero cyangwa se mu madini, ibyo bakora natwe nibyo dukora.
Now there's a lot of difference in pastors.
Hariho abapasiteri batandukanye.
Some pastors want to be worshipped.
Abapasiteri bamwe bakenera kuramywa.
Our pastor here is not like that, and I thank God for him. But be careful. Be careful. I have been thrown out of a church by the pastor, and he said, "This is my church. This is Jesus' church." So the human messengers can be pastors or bishops or priests or missionaries.
z'idini cyangwa se z'abantu zishobora kuba abantu batandukanye, abapasiteri, ababishop, abamisiyonere, abigisha batandukanye.
Now, I think the people that translate the Bible are often some kind of big people in religion.
Abantu basobanura Bibiliya nabo baba bafashwe nk'abantu b'ibirangirire bari hejuru bakomeye mu idini.
So this warning, which this is the best translation, religion of messengers, meaning human messengers, that's the best translation. But most Bible translators translate it this way because this makes them a little bit uncomfortable.
Nukuvuga ngo bano basobanuzi bagiye bakoresha no magambo kiringiri bavuze ngo ni intumwa y'idini, nibyo bifite nk'ubusobanuro nyabwo kuruta kuramya abamarayika cyangwa se idini ry'abamarayika.
Okay, now you've heard me say before, I think often God puts something in the Bible that could mean this or it could mean this, but they're both true. So God puts it that way because he's emphasizing both truths at one time.
Hari igihe nagiye mvuga amagambo nyine nyasubiramo kenshi mvuga ukuntu Imana ishobora gukoresha iyi mvugo n'iyi mvugo, ariko za mvugo zibiri Imana ikoresheje ari ugushimangira cyane ukuri kwayo cyangwa se zihamye.
Okay, so Colossians talks a lot about the flesh and warns about the flesh. These two don't have flesh, but these two have flesh. The human messengers are flesh.
Nukuvuga ngo abasobanuzi basobanuye no magambo ari abiri kuramya abamarayika nta kintu cy'umubiri gihakizamo, ariko intumwa y'idini nuko kuramya intumwa ko harazamo gukora.
So I think a Bible translator that wants to protect his flesh religion will translate this about angels instead of about human messengers.
Instead,
a Bible translator who wants to protect his flesh religion will change this verse to angels instead of humans.
Noneho abasobanuzi bakeneye gushimangira cyangwa se gushigikira imyumvire y'idini no gukora kw'abantu bagahita bakoresha amagambo nk'ayo kuramya marayika aho kuvuga ngo ni intumwa y'idini, bakumva ko ariho zoroshe bizumvikana kaneza.
Now, I think this is the most important part of Colossians, and I think is one of the most important passages in the Bible.
Iyi mirongo yo mu Bakolosayi ni imirongo y'ingenzi cyane ntekereza ko inakomeye muri Bibiliya yose.
But it's a little bit scary.
Ariko kandi ino mirongo iteye
I've been punished a lot by human messengers who want me to worship them, and I didn't worship them the way they wanted. And I've been punished many times by the human messengers.
Narahamwe inshuro nyinshi cyane banziza kubera ko naze kuramya abantu cyangwa se kuramya umuntu.
So, in a way, it would be easier to jump over these verses. Just leave Colossians 2:18 to 23. Just leave them, and we'll jump into chapter 3. But I think these are very important for the gospel.
Zaba zoroshe rero kumva ko ino mirongo ihayivuga bene ico kintu cyo gushaka kutemera, donc wemere kuramya umuntu ukaba ngo reka dusimbe ino mirongo tuje ku yindi iyi ngiyi sinasige.
So I admit I fear a little bit that somebody's going to hear what I teach and not like it, and like many other people have punished me, I could get punished. I don't think it's going to be you guys, but I never know.
No kuvuga ino mirongo ndi kuvuga no kuvuga ngo binanteye nubwo kubera ko nagiye mbihanirwa. Hari n'abantu bashobora kuzumva bino bintu simpamvuga ngo twebwe twicaranya, hari n'abandi bashobora kuzazumva bakabitegera bakumva bitabamereye neza na kwabuhanwa na hamwe nzira kwanga kuramya abantu bikangaruka.
So I have been punished so many times by religious people that I do have a fear, and that's why Paul is writing this. He says, do not let anybody cheat you of your prize by accepting fear from a human messenger that makes his own religious version of the gospel.
Niyo mpamvu Pawulo akomeza ashimangira cyane ko bino bintu ari iby'ingenzi tudakwiye kwemera ko hari umuntu watuvusa ingororano zituvugishije kwicisha bugufi cyangwa se atuvugishije gushaka ngo tumuramye.
Now, so I have this fear. I admit that. I have this fear. And it's not based on nothing. It's based on things that are really happening. But now, in the Old Testament, fear and worship are very similar.
Fear and worship.
Fear and worship. Fear Jehovah, worship Jehovah. They're very similar, very close.
No kuramya no kubaha Imana cyangwa se ubaha Uwiteka, ayo ni amagambo azagenda ashaka guhura cyane.
So when I have some fear of human messengers, I shouldn't have, but it's a little bit like I'm almost kind of worshiping because of the fear, because of the punishment that I've had from soon after I became a Christian until now.
No kuramya umuntu bigashaka koroha ko ushobora gutinya cyangwa se kubaha umuntu kubera gutinya ko ushobora guhanwa. No kwa gutinya ukubaha ukaramya umuntu ugiye kugwa muri wa mutego twaya tuvuga hano.
And I share that with you. Because if you share the truth, you'll be in danger also. There's a lot of religious people that will try to destroy you if you promote the gospel and remove all of the religious stuff that other people have.
Kandi mbora mbibabwira kenshi dukomeza gusangira ubutumwa bwiza dushura ukuri tugerageza kwanga ikinyoma cy'idini tugikubitira hasi nuko ngo bibatera kwangwa no gutukwa ndetse no kubagira nakaga gakomeye.
Does Satan deserve worship?
Satani akwiriye kuramya kweli?
No. Worship?
Satani akeneye kuramya.
Yes. He even tried to deceive Jesus into worshiping Satan. Now, Satan is behind the flesh and behind the religion that flesh promotes.
Satani ni uri inyuma y'ibidini ryamamaza kandi akaba ni inyuma y'izumubiri.
So Satan wants worship, although he's not worthy and doesn't deserve worship.
Satani akenera ko bamuramya nubwo adakwiriye kuramya.
Now, do human messengers deserve worship?
Abana b'abantu bakeneye ko baramywa nabo?
No.
Oh yeah.
Do they sometimes want worship?
Ariko iyo mureba rimwe na rimwe baza bakenera ko babaramya cyangwa tibaza bakenera ko babaramya.
Yes. Not all. But some do.
And they
won't say usually, bow down and worship me, but by their power and they're using fear, they are indirectly trying to get our worship.
Ahubwo babikora mu buryo buri indirect cyangwa se mu buryo uciye ku ruhande.
Now, this then gets close to what some of us have studied several times, especially when we were studying the 7 churches in Revelation. The Greek word porne.
Sanivyo twigeze kwiga na bamwe hano mu minsi yashize ijambo rivuga porne
or porneia.
Porne ni ijambo ry'ikigiriki.
Okay, which religious people say these are talking about sex sins, and they will use that to try to create fear, to try to move people towards a kind of a worship for the powerful religious leaders.
No, iri jambo pornei cyangwa porneia bakarikoresha bashaka kuvuga hejuru y'ubusambanyi.
But I've shared with you before, this Greek word, if you study it carefully, it comes from a word that means to sell.
Ariko ririya jambo pornei riva mu ijambo uri cekinze muri dictionary usanga ko riva mu ijambo kugurisha.
And it's not about sex sins originally. It's used for them sometimes, but it's not primarily about
iriya pornei mbere barikoreshaga bavuga hejuru y'ubusambanyi ariko ntabwo ari bwo busobanuro nyakuri.
But sometimes human religious messengers or leaders will use fear to control us so that we're kind of worshiping, and we sell our freedom and we sell the truth because we fear the human messengers or leaders.
Ariko uzasanga iri jambo pornei twatwita ngo ni ukugurisha cyangwa se kugura abantu barikoresha bagakoresha imbaraga zabo kugira ngo abantu babarange cyangwa se bagurishe cyangwa se batange ibyishimo zabo cyangwa se umudendezo wabo ku bandi bantu.
And what we're talking about is one of the main reasons for the Reformation in Europe 500 years ago, Protestant Reformation.
Ni ukuvuga ngo imyaka 500 ishize hajeho cyangwa se abareforume.
So the leaders in the big church at that time had so much power, they killed people. The leaders of that church killed people if they didn't agree with the leaders.
Abayobozi bo muri ayo madini y'icyo gihe bari bafite imbaraga mu buryo bicaga n'abantu.
So they made people fear them. And people sold their freedom and the truth because they feared the human messengers, the human leaders.
Kubera gutinya abayobozi b'abantu bagurisha freedom yabo cyangwa se umwidegenzo wabo cyangwa se amahoro yabo n'ukuri kwabo bakakugurisha kuri abo bayoboye.
So I think the main message of Colossians is a warning about this.
Isomo rikomeye hano mu Bakolosayi ni ukuduhonya, ni ukutubwira ko dukwiye kuba maso kubijanye no kukuramya abantu.
So back to 2:18, let no one keep cheating you of your prize by delighting in, I would say, self-sacrifice or the religion of messengers.
Tiyakagira umuntu bavutsa ingororano zanyu abacishe kwihindura bugufi no gusenga abamarayika ariko intumwa.
Then it continues, in taking his stand on visions. Does yours say taking his stand or something? Something about visions. Okay, now that Greek word means claiming special powers.
Mu Kigiriki yo bavuga ko ari kuvuga cyangwa se kwiyitirira imbaraga zidasanzwe.
I don't think it really means vision. My dictionary says it means to go into or possess something or to claim special powers, which leaders do sometimes.
Bakoresheje ijambo kuba kazitereye mu bakoresheje imbaraga ngo z'ubuyobozi.
Now, it does have the word seen. It doesn't have the word visions. It does have the word seen. So maybe this is talking about some kind of a spiritual vision or revelation. That's not clear to me.
Ntabwo bisobanutse neza ariko ni imbaraga ushobora kuba ati mfite iyerekwa, mfite ihishurirwa runaka.
But the next part, we're still in verse 18, inflated without cause by his, and the Greek is fleshly mind. Fleshly mind.
Bakazitereyemo atewe kwihimbariza ubusa n'ubwenge bwa kamere.
So inflated means proud.
Nukuvuga ngo iryo jambo inflated ubwibone,
I'm trying to look bigger than I really am.
Umuntu akigira munini
gusumba. Human messengers or leaders are trying to do, to use fear to make themselves look bigger than they really are.
Nukuvuga ngo abantu bakigira abantu banini cyane ndetse gusumba uko bangana.
And what makes him want to be bigger than he really is?
Niki gituma agaragara ko ari munini gusumba uko
ari? The is clear. Fleshly mind, fleshly thinking, fleshly believing. Believing in humans' goodness and power instead of Jesus on the cross.
Igitera wa muntu kwizamura akaba munini cyane, babivuze hano ngo abiterwa na kamere, abiterwa n'umubiri, abiterwa no kwihimbaza ubwe mu bitekerezo.
And remember that the chapter and verse divisions in the Bible were put in by humans. They were not in the first Bibles.
Bibiliya ya mbere ntiyari ifite amashapitire n'amaverse n'abantu bagiye babishiramo.
So the last part of verse 18 and the first part of 19 are not separated in the first Bibles.
Muri Bibiliya ya mbere imirongo ya nyuma iheka hano mu gice cya 18 n'iya 19 ntabwo itandukanye yose irahuye.
They're still one sentence. So let me read those two as one sentence. The last part of verse 18, the first part of 19.
Reka some ibice za nyuma muri iki gice mu murongo wa 18 n'uwa 19.
Might be easier to just translate for me.
Let me do that.
Inflated without cause by his fleshly mind and not holding the head.
Kwihimbariza ubusa n'ubwenge bwa kamere.
Now, I don't know how your translation is. My English translation says not holding fast to the head, but the Greek is not holding, not having the head.
That is 19.
The first part of 19. Maybe you just translate how yours has it into English. Not holding, not having something.
The last part.
The first part of 19.
Tifatanye na wa mutwe. Not holding with the head.
Okay, what it says is not having not having the head.
Kutagira umutwe.
Now, so what are the two things that are compared? The end of verse 18, the beginning of verse 19. It's comparing two things.
Ko barakompara ibintu bibiri hano mu gice umurongo wa 18 n'uwa 19.
And I wish they didn't divide that into two verses because it shouldn't. It's one sentence, one thought.
Bari byiza ko badatandukanya aho hantu bari guhita bahahuza.
Inflated by the fleshly mind, not holding the head. What are the two things compared?
Bari guhita bafata ngo kwihimbariza ubusa n'ubwenge bwa kamere bagahita bahuza ntiyifatanye n'umutwe.
The flesh and the head.
N'umubiri.
What is the head?
Umubiri n'umutwe. Umutwe ni iki?
The head is Jesus.
Umutwe ni Yesu Kristo.
It is competition between Jesus and the flesh. That black line, they don't mix.
Ntibivanga. Yesu n'umubiri ntibivanga.
So the issue is not about angels, the issue is about flesh. It says so right here.
Ikigenderewe muri no mirongo ntabwo ari abamarayika ahubwo n'umubiri.
And flesh means humans, and the word messenger, since we're talking about flesh, I think there's strong reason to remove the angel one and say it is the religion taught by human messengers, flesh religion.
Nukuwa kuramo n'ibintu zo kuramya abamarayika tukazana idini ry'umubiri akaba ari cyo dufata kandi cyo akaba ari cyo twirinda akaba ari cyo dushaka.
Now, are you getting me there? Are we together?
Aho ngaho ko turumvikana.
So you can either hold to the fleshly thinking, which is religion, self-sacrifice, all of that. You can hold to that.
Nukuwa ko kwifatanya n'idini cyangwa se no kiranuka kwawe byose biragenda bikagaruka
or you can have the head,
cyangwa se ukagira
which is Jesus. Not both, one or the other.
ugire kimwe ikindi tu.
Now these people were born again, so they had Jesus, but in their daily life they were being pulled away from the truth by human messengers and their religious teachers.
Abakolosayi bari baravutse ubwa kabiri ariko ubuzima bwabo bwa buri munsi bagashaka kugenda bakurikiza ibi bintu by'idini cyangwa se ibi bintu zo kugenda bubahiriza iby'intumwa z'abantu cyangwa se baca bugufi kuba.
So let's continue in verse 19, then it's already time for a break. But let's just do a little bit more in 19. Not holding the head, from whom the entire body being supplied.
Tiyifatanye na wa mutwe ariho umubiri wose uvana gukura kwawo.
Now, the entire body means the whole church, which means everybody who's a true believer. Church is not a building in the New Testament, it's people who are born again.
Nukuvuga ngo itorero ntabwo ari inyubako ahubwo n'abantu bose bavutse ubwa kabiri.
So this word supplied, the whole body, every believer has what they need is being supplied by the head.
Nukuvuga ngo umuntu wese cyangwa se abantu bose bahuzwa bafatanywa na wa mutwe.
Now, religion likes to believe in human messengers or leaders because we can see them and we can talk to them and we can ask them, please help me. But it's not right. Trusting the head, Jesus, that we can't see, he is the one that supplies everything that we need.
Ariko mu buryo bw'abantu cyane cyane twebwe tuza dushaka kwemera abantu no kuba abantu cyangwa se kuba shiraje kuko nibo tubona ariko siko kuri ahubwo Yesu Kristo niwe mutwe wacu ni nazo dukwiye kwemera nazo dukwiye kwizera.
Now the Uber driver that brought me here today,
umuntu wanzanye uyu munsi
we were talking about how long my wife and I have been here, and then he said, who pays your salary?
Twagiye tuganira n'uwo muntu wanzanye tumubwira igihe tumaze no n'umugore akazabaza ngo se ninde uzubishurira ninde uzubahemba.
I said, I don't have a salary.
ndamubwira ngo nta mushahara.
For more than 45 years, I have not had a salary.
Imyaka 40 ishize nta mushahara.
I have no guaranteed income.
nta kuvuga ngo mfite garanti yo kuvuga ngo igihe runaka nzobona amafaranga.
I don't have an organization or a government that says we will give you this money if you do that.
nta organization nimwe dukorana mvuga ngo ukora ibi bintu numara kubikora tuzaguhereza aya mafaranga.
He said, how do you survive? How do you
survive?
And I said, my boss is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He can easily supply everything I need, and that's exactly what this word means. It says, these are 3 definitions of that Greek word. To give to somebody as a gift. As a gift. Then the second one is to provide for another person at your own expense. That's what Jesus does. At his expense, he pays. The third definition, to provide what is necessary for the well-being of another person.
No kugufasha cyangwa se akaguha ukagira ubuzima bwiza mu buryo ufasha n'undi muntu.
That's what he always does.
Nicho ahora akora.
He always provides what is necessary for this man's well-being. He, the head, always provides that. And that's what this says. So this is saying, I should be trusting him for my needs, not the human messenger, not the flesh. He is the one that's strong enough and big enough to give me everything I need, and he does it as a gift.
Niwe ukomeye gusumba aba bantu kandi ni ushobora gutanga ibyo abantu badashobora gutanga.
Held together by the joints and ligaments and grows with the growth that which is from God. This is talking about S2 probably.
Ahangaha ko baravuga mu gice cya kabiri cy'agakiza ugatungwa n'ibyo ingingo n'imitsi bitanga.
It might mean increasing the members of the church. It might mean new people are saved, but I think it mainly is talking about spiritual growth for people who are already saved.
Bishobora gusobanura kwiyongera kw'abantu bakijijwe bizeye, ariko kandi bishobora no gusobanura uburyo umuntu ashobora gukura mu kino gice cya kabiri cy'agakiza.
It probably means both of those, S1 and 2.
Bishobora gutwara izo nani.
But where does the growth come from?
Gukura kuva hehe this verse?
Does it come from the human messengers? Does it come from the flesh? Does it come from religion? No, it says from God. So again, God and flesh are on the opposite side. This is the truth. This is not the truth. This is the gospel. This is religion.
Niyo mpamvu mubona hano kuri iri taburo umubiri n'Imana biratandukanye. Idini n'Imana biratandukanye.
Okay. Added here during the break, the flesh there is equal to these human messengers, and I think that's why angels. It's all right to translate the word angel, but because the subject before and after is flesh, it's better to translate it human messengers or flesh.
Aya magambo atatu nari navuze ndi kuyasobanura nahise nahuza yose agaragaza kuramya abamarayika cyangwa se abantu zose tubihereza ijambo rimwe ko ari umubiri ugereranije cyangwa se urimo urakompara n'ukuri cyangwa se n'umwuka cyangwa se Yesu.
So then he says in verse 20,
umurongo wa 20,
if you have died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world,
nuko rero nimba mwarapfanye na Kristo mukaba mwarapfuye ku migenzereze ya mbere y'isi.
So now he's comparing Jesus Christ with the world, and notice flesh, Satan, world, they're working together.
No, hano no mwanditsi atangiye kugereranya Yesu ndetse n'isi.
So the world is a belief system. We think the world is a planet that we live on, but in the Bible it means a belief system, which is the Satan flesh belief system.
Ntabwo ari planete iyi ngiyi isanzwe muri Bibiliya isi ni uburyo umuntu atekereza.
So you could say, if you died with Christ to the elementary or basic teachings or beliefs of the world,
nuko rero niba mwarapfanye na Kristo mukaba mwarapfuye ku migenzereze y'iby'isi.
Now, did I kill myself? No, I didn't die myself. I died with Jesus legally in God's court.
Mu buryo bw'ubumana napfanye na Kristo, ariko si ugupfa mu buryo buri fizike.
I can't kill my flesh.
Ntabwo ari ukwica umubiri
I can
wanjye.
kill my body, but I can't kill the flesh, the belief system inside me.
Nshobora kwica umubiri bisanzwe ariyo body, ariko ntabwo nshobora kwica umubiri ukomeze cyangwa se kamere.
But legally in God's court, when Jesus died, I was baptized into his death. So God says my flesh is dead. It doesn't work that way practically in my life all the time, but God says I'm legally dead, my flesh.
Ni ukuvuga ngo mu buryo bugaragara bufatika ntabwo napfanye nawe, ariko mu buryo bw'ubumana napfanye nawe.
So listen, he says, if you died with Christ, why, as if you were still living in the world, do you submit to decrees?
Aravuga rero ngo nimba mwarapfanye na Kristo, niki gituma mwemera kuyoboka amategeko y'imihango?
Okay, now that word decree, I think I mentioned last week, we get the English or French word dogma from this.
Twasanze aya mategeko n'imihango dusangamo ijambo dogma.
Dogma means an opinion.
Dogma ni igitekerezo
Flesh has an opinion. These human messengers have an opinion, and that is religion.
Ni ukuvuga umubiri ufite igitekerezo runaka, ufite dogma runaka.
It also means judgment. These flesh leaders like to judge people that believe the truth and punish them so that they will submit to their dogma.
Uyu mubiri twavugaga cyangwa se ibi byose twagenda kuvuga no mazina bifite uburyo cyangwa se bufite ukuntu baciteka baca urubanza.
Now it's interesting, another definition here is ordain.
Ordaining a leader. Kuyoboka amategeko n'imihango. Ijambo bakoresheje ordain cyangwa se nk'ibi bintu bazakunda gukora byo guhereza nk'abandi inshingano.
So why do you submit to ordaining? The Pope is ordained. I don't think we do have to submit to the Pope or somebody else.
Kubera iki muyoboka ibi bijanye n'imihango y'abantu?
And it also, the same Greek word, means to obey regulations.
Cyangwa se kubaha amategeko.
Then he says, such as, and that's verse 21. So this is not all of them, but these are examples of what the world teaches, but we should not accept that teaching.
Izi ni ingero bakomereza mu murongo wa 24 batubwira ko twebwe tudakwiye kwigisha, ariko ni urugero rw'uko mu isi bakora.
Now, what are the examples? Verse 21.
Urugero batanze baravuga ngo tugafateho.
Do not handle. Don't have anything to do with that.
Tugakoreho.
Do not taste. Do not eat that kind of food. Do not touch. If you touch that, you're not a good Christian. You might not go to heaven. Don't touch. These are all kinds of self-sacrifice instead of Jesus' sacrifice. Okay. Then, again, the same sentence continues into verse 22, and it says, which...
The sacrifice of Jesus is enough.
Is enough, but not many people believe that.
No.
Okay. So do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, same sentence, which all refer to things destined to perish with use.
Tugafateho, tugasogongeraho, tugakoreho, kandi ibyo byose biba biheze iyo biriwe.
Now, I'm not asking you to give examples, but you can think in your own mind.
Simbabwira ngo mumpeze ingero, ariko mu bitekerezo gusa.
In your background, in your culture,
cyangwa se mu mico yawe.
In the teaching of other religious teachers.
N'abandi bantu nagiye mumva bigisha
basically guarantee that you've had a lot of teachers that said things like this. Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. These are just examples. And they're all about controlling myself to make myself good enough that I don't need the cross.
Nimwumva abantu bigisha bakaba ngo tukagire gutya tugakore kuri iki tugasogongere tukagire gute umenye ko izo zose ari bihakana umusaraba.
Now, these three things that the flesh mind says do not touch, what does Paul say God's idea about them is?
Ibi bintu uko ari bitatu Pawulo ahayavuga hano tudakwiye kugira gutya niki Pawulo ahayavuga bigomba kuba.
Things which are destined to perish with use. The things that religion says don't touch, God intended to be used.
Ni ukuvuga ngo ibintu bavuga ngo ntimukore kuri ibi ngibi Imana ivuga ko byashize byarangiye.
Now, we're not going to take time because we're pushing, but in 1 Timothy chapter 4, the first six verses are saying the same thing.
Muri Timoteyo wa mbere igice cya gatandatu bavuga cyo kimwe n'ahangaha.
Religion says, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But in 1 Timothy 4, Paul said, God created everything and he created everything good and nothing is to be rejected.
Timoteyo wa mbere kane yavuze ngo ibintu byose ngo biba byejejwe
Everything created by God is good and nothing is to be rejected. Okay, now religion tells us we have to reject the things that whatever that human messenger says, and if we don't, then we will be rejected. Now, second part, verse 22. In accordance with the commandments and teachings of men. And this is another word for flesh. Okay, so religion is all based, as I said, about human messengers or leaders teaching us what they say is the right religion, but it's not the gospel. And the Greek word for commandments is the same Greek word that's used for the 10 commandments. So religion and their messengers or leaders, they make commandments that we have to obey because then it gives those messengers more power.
Nukuvuga rero hano mu idini aba bantu baba bafite n'amategeko abantu bakwiye gukurikiza, iyo batayakurikije nukuvuga abantu barahanwa bakoresha za mbaraga z'uko abantu batsinzwe ibyo bashizeho bagahana.
Now, verse 23 is an amazing verse.
Umurongo wa 23.
Okay.
Uyu rero
This is an amazing verse, and it's so amazing that most translators cheat on it because it's so amazing. I don't know if we have time, but I have in my notes here 11 different English translations, and none of them are the same. How is that possible?
Mfite amavajone nagiye nkoresha 11 nukwanga bo bose ntabavuze ijambo rimwe bavuze amagambo atandukanye kuri uriya.
It's because the human messengers want to promote their religion and they somehow have to translate the Bible and change it so it fits to promote the religion of the flesh human messengers instead of the truth.
Impamvu bagoretse uno murongo niba abasobanuzi bashatse kunezeza ibyo bemera cyangwa se iby'idini bakoresha ayo magambo atandukanye.
So verse 23 is a summary. He says, these are matters which have to be sure the appearance of wisdom.
Ni koko ibyo bisa naho ari iby'ubwenge.
Okay, now the Greek word is words. These are words. So we're talking about words and teaching. We're not really talking about behavior. We're talking about words, which means belief.
Aha bavuga ngo koko bisa naho ari iby'ubwenge mu kigiriki yo bakoresha ngo bisa n'amagambo kuko hano ntabwo tuvuga imyitwarire ko turavuga amagambo.
So when he says these, he's talking about all the things he's just mentioned in the verses just before that.
Ibi yavuze ngo ibyo bisa naho ari iby'ubwenge ibyo ni ibibanza muri no mirongo yo haruguru twari.
Laws about food, laws about trade, laws about religious holidays, including new moons and Sabbath, laws that say don't handle, don't taste, don't touch, and all the other religious laws. These, to be sure, have the appearance of wisdom. So somebody comes along and tells you about all the religious laws they obey, and your first thought is, wow, that's an amazing person. They obey all those laws. Wow, that person is really sacrificing himself. He must have a strong will. He must have a strong will. Okay, so Paul says, if you don't think about it much, it looks amazing. These words, to be sure, have the appearance of wisdom. And then he says, in self-made religion, that is how my translation has it. I'd like to know how yours has it. People, words, to be sure, that have the appearance of wisdom in self-made religion.
Okay, bigire nkabicisha bugufi bigo nk'iby'umubiri. The word that they are using, it is they fast.
Fast? No.
Kwigomwa.
This is a compound Greek word. This is a compound Greek word, okay?
N'ukwigomwa iby'umubiri hobamo gufunga, hobamo no kwiyima telefone. Urumva niko kwiyima wakoresha kadinayo.
The Greek word is two words.
Okay.
Do we all agree that the word in your language is fasting?
Yeah.
Wow, I don't know how they got that.
They are adding, it is even more than fasting. It can deny different things.
Okay, that's against the self-sacrifice. Religion wants you to sacrifice yourself. And then you can remove Jesus and his sacrifice.
Biragaruka muri bya bindi byo kuvuga ngo ntitwemera ko Yesu yiyanze ku bwacu, ko turashaka natwe kwiyanga kugira ngo tube nka we.
Okay, now, remember?
Tugira icyo turonka.
So,
ariko ijambo iyo bakoresha hano mu kigiki yaranditse yarano ngo ni will religion. You will the religion ijambo no gushaka bw'idini.
So these four words are they're translated the one Greek word threskeia. You don't have to know that. I want you to hear that.
Twagiye tuvuga kuramya idini zagiye bigaruka mu ijambo
Here it says threskeia angelos. Threskeia angelos. Here it says threskeia thelo. Thelo means your will.
No kuba ngo hano mu bushake bw'umuntu.
So this is saying the belief of religion is by your will.
Imyizerere y'idini ngo
You can control your life.
You can
control your life.
Control. Kubw'ubushake bwawe ushobora gukontorora ubuzima bwawe cyangwa se kugenga ubuzima bwawe.
So now this is the threskeia angelos. This is the threskeia will. So it's still talking the same subject, religion. Religion from human messengers, which says your will is the most important thing.
Ubushake mu idini cyangwa se ubushake bw'umuntu no ku giti ciwe.
Now I love this passage because to me it explains so many things that I see in religion that I think are garbage. I think are garbage. And that's what this is saying. So this is saying the religion brought by or taught by human messengers, flesh, is about that religion is about the human will.
Ibintu byazanywe n'izi ntumwa z'abantu bikazara ugushaka kw'idini cyangwa se ubushake bw'abantu.
So I decide I'm not going to do that.
nahisemo sinzongera gukora kino kintu.
You're bad people. You do those bad things.
Mwebwe muri abantu babi mu
I
gukora bibi.
decide by my will, my free will, I won't do those bad things.
Ariko jewe nahisemo sinkora biriya bintu.
Look at how great I am.
Reba jewe ukuntu ndi umuntu
Look at how clean and pure I am.
reba ukuntu jewe ndi
Look at how
umukirisitu
powerful I am.
reba ukuntu jewe
Look at how wise I
reba
am.
ukuntu jewe ndi umunyabwenge.
That's kind of like worship, isn't it?
Kuvuga ngo ubwo ni uburyo
Worshiping a
gusa
human
bwo
messenger and leader.
kwiramya cyangwa se ukaramya undi muntu.
Okay, so will, the word will, I want to make sure we understand that.
Iri jambo ubushake
It means desire, what you want,
aya amahitamo nayita ubushake
and what you decide based on your desire.
icyo wahisemo bishingiye ku bushake ufite cyangwa se desire ufite.
Now, the religious people say they can control their desires. Their desires, their will push their desire down, so they will not do the bad things that others do.
Mu idini baza babwirana ngo bashobora gukontorora desire zabo cyangwa se ubushake n'ibyifuzo byabo.
But your will, your decisions always follow your desires. Always, always,
ariko
always.
igihe cyose ubushake bwawe umwanzuro wawe uzukurikira ibyifuzo zawe cyangwa desire zawe.
Now, let me use a bad example so that it won't be something from any of your lives, because I don't want to criticize anybody here. Okay, so this proud person will say that person went out and got drunk and went to a prostitute. But me, I have a strong will. I would never do that. And that guy will say, sure, I have desires like everybody else, but I decided I will not do that. They're boasting about their will. Your will is weak, your will is bad, their will is better. But they're following their desires just like you are, just that they have another desire, which is pride, and their pride desire is stronger than their desire to get drunk. So they have one desire that's stronger, and they boast about that. Now, this is a hard subject. I know that. When I'm sharing the gospel with something, I will do everything I can with God's help to convince their will to change so that they accept the gospel, whereas before they were not accepting the gospel.
shobojwe n'Imana kugira ngo uriya muntu nimba atarumva ubutumwa bwiza abe yakumva akaba yahindura amahitamo yiwe cyangwa se ibyo yemeraga akaba yabihinduka.
So I encourage you, and I think there's biblical support.
Nabashishikariza kandi na Bibiliya irabiha.
When you're sharing the gospel with an unbeliever, everything that God gives you, use it to convince them to make a decision, their will, to accept the gospel as the truth.
Uzakoreshe uburyo bwose bushoboka mu buzima bwawe nuhura n'umuntu mukaganira umuganirize umugeze ku rwego ashobora kuba yakwemera ubutumwa bwiza akareka kwemera ibyifuzo n'amahitamo yiwe.
So Paul says, we beg you to be reconciled to Christ, like you have your free choice to be reconciled to Christ. But then Jesus said, nobody comes to me unless the Father who sent me calls them to me.
Yes, agahita avuga ngo nta numwe uza kwa data keretse arehejwe nawe na data.
And Paul talks about the sovereignty of God, and in Romans 9 he uses Jacob and Esau as an example of that.
Paul akoresha urugero rwa Esau na Yakobo avuga hejuru y'ubudahangarwa n'ubutware bw'Imana.
Now we all like to believe in free will.
dukunda kwizera amahitamo yacu y'abantu.
I don't think anybody here has free will.
Ariko sinzi ko hano bishoboka ko umuntu amahitamo
Will,
nimba wemera amahitamo yawe.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you 20,000 shillings if you walk down in the street here
nusohoka hanze
and jump over this building.
numara usimbi no plot.
Free will. Do it. I'll give you 20,000.
Amahitamo yawe nimba bishoboka usimbe ndaguha 220,000 z'amanyakenya usimbire hasi cyangwa usimbe plot.
Would you like to get that 20,000 shillings?
Ibyo 20,000 woshaka kubifata?
Everybody would. Yeah. So your will, your decision, your desire, yeah, I'd like to have that 20,000 shillings.
Nukuvuga buri wese yavuga amahitamo no gushaka ko ukeneye ibyo 20,000.
But are you going to go down there and jump?
Ariko se urasimbira hasi bikunde?
No, because you know that you don't have enough power.
Kubera ko udafite imbaraga zihagije urabyizi.
So free will only exists with somebody who has all power.
Amahitamo abaho iyo bivuye kuri wa wundi ufite imbaraga zose.
If Martin and I are having a quarrel or a fight,
jewe na Marite twagize nk'intongo,
we won't do this. But if we did,
ntabwo tubikora ariko tubikora.
At the end, who would win?
Ku maherezo cyangwa se ku mwisho ninde ushobora kunesha?
Whoever stronger.
Ukomeye niwe wonesha.
And that's what the will is all about. The will is only as free as the power that supports it.
Mukwanga amahitamo ajana.
You can say, I decided I will be the president of the US next week.
Ukaba ngo mpisemo kuba president wa Amerika mu cyumweru gitaha.
I decided that.
Nabihisemo.
But I don't think it'll work because I don't think I have enough power.
Sinzi ko mfite imbaraga zihagije zo kuba nagera kuri cyo.
I decided I want to have a black Mercedes and next week I'll drive a black Mercedes here.
Ngahitamo none nkaba ngo ejo zogira imodoka ya Mercedes.
I can decide my free will. I will get a black Mercedes.
Amahitamo yanjye kavuga ati ndashaka iyo modoka.
But my pocket is empty.
Ariko mu mufuko waje nta power
to buy the black Mercedes. Okay, that's the problem with will religion. If I am God, I have a free will. If I am God, I have a free will. What was the first lie that Satan told Hawa in the garden? You can be like God. And we believe that. So we think your free will is the most important part of religion, and that's what Colossians is talking about. Now, I'm not criticizing anybody. If you feel criticized, I'm sorry for that. But this is what religion is about. If you do bad behavior, you will be punished. Why? So that next time your will change and you will not do that bad behavior again. Right? Isn't that what the punishment is for? You did a bad thing, we will punish you so that next time you won't do that. So that your will be changed next time. So religion says bad behavior is from bad decisions, and decisions means your will. What did you want and decide to do? Isn't that correct? Then good behavior is from good decisions, and decision means your will. So your good will made a good decision and you did good behavior, so you can be our leader. So religion says if you really do not want or will to do that, you won't do it.
nimba bahisemo kudakora kiriya kintu mu idini bazaba umuntu ugikora.
You did a bad thing because you want to do a bad thing. Remember, will means want and decide.
Wakoze ikintu kibi kubera ko ari we washatse kugikora.
Isn't that what we're taught? We do bad things because we want to do bad things.
Tuzadukora ibintu bibi kubera ko twahisemo.
And then punishment might change your want to, so that next time you want to not be punished, so you don't do that bad thing again.
No ibihano bigashirwaho kugira ngo bibashe guhindura bya bintu bibi wakoze ntuzongere kubikora.
Is that the gospel?
Ubwo ni ubutumwa bwiza.
Why did Jesus die?
Kubera iki Yesu yapfuye ku musaraba?
Because my will is not good.
Ni ukubera ko amahitamo yanjye
My flesh is not good.
Umubiri wanje ntabwo uhagije cyangwa ari mwiza.
And the Greek word is will religion. The religion that's based on the will. Now, religious people don't like to admit that, so they change this and translate it differently.
Kubera ko mu idini badakunda kwitwa ko ari abanyamubiri cyangwa se bagendera ku bushake n'ibyo batekereza, tibemera bahita bahindura n'amagambo.
Now I want to go to Romans 7:15 to 21. And by the way, Pastor, I don't know if you've ever taught that, but I don't think I have ever been in a church in my 76 years of life where somebody taught those verses.
Okay, simbizi wenda pastor nimba mwebwe mwaba mwarigishije abaroma igice cya 7:15-21 ariko imyaka yanje 76 mfite ntaho numva bigisha uriya murongo muri kanisa.
And just as in Colossians 2, in Romans 7, the translators change the words so that it'll fit in with their will religion.
No abasobanuzi bino bavugaga mu Bakolosayi bizabura n'ibyo mu Baroma bahise babihindura kugira ngo buzuze bwa bushake bw'abantu.
Or they just don't teach this passage. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have been under a teacher who taught these verses from Romans 7, these exact verses?
Ndabaza ninde muntu ushobora kuba warabaye ahantu bigisha Abaroma igice cya 7:15-20.
Not me. I'm only 76 years old, so maybe if I wait longer, I will. Okay, Romans 7:15. You should read the whole chapter, but I'm just taking these verses. Paul, who wrote the most important part of the Bible, he says, "For what I am doing, I do not understand."
Sinzi ibyo nkora kuko ibyo nkora.
Okay, well, Paul, you should go back to one of these human messengers who are teaching flesh religion. They understand. They'll explain it to you. Paul says, I don't understand, but people today say they understand. It's your will.
Ariko iyo abantu bigisha bino bintu by'umubiri bazaba bibwira ngo barabizi. Pawulo bakavuga ngo simbaya nibi.
Now listen, second part of verse 15. Paul, this is Paul. This isn't Judas, this is Paul. For I am not doing what I will. That's what the Greek says. I'm not doing what I will. What I think about and desire and decide to do, I'm not doing that.
Sinzi ibyo nkora kuko ibyo nshaka atari ibyo nkora.
So Paul says what he's doing and his will don't agree.
Ibyo Paul ashaka n'ibyo akora biratandukanye.
Religion says what you're doing is because that's what you will to do. That's what you want to do. Paul says, no, that's not true. What I'm doing and what I will are different.
Idini ryo rikavuga ngo ibi ngibi wayikora nibyo wahisemo. Paul wakaza akavuga ngo ibyo nshaka gukora sibyo mpaye nkora.
What I will to do, I'm not doing what I will to do, but I am doing what I hate. I'm doing what I hate.
Ibyo nshaka atari ibyo nkora, ahubwo ibyo nanga akaba ari ibyo nkora. Ibyo nanga akaba ari ibyo nkora.
Did you get that? That's Paul. It's not Judas, that's Paul. Paul said, I am doing what I hate.
Ahubwo ibyo nanga nibyo nkora.
Now, if Paul did something that his human messenger leader didn't like, what would the human messenger leader do to Paul?
Pawulo aramutse adakoze ibyo bano bayobozi bo mu idini badashaka niki bari kumukora?
Punish him.
Ni ukumuhana.
Why do you punish somebody for doing what they hate to do?
Kubera iki muhanya umuntu wakoze icyo yanga gukora?
He already hates it. He already hates it, but he's doing it.
Ariko karabikora.
You see why I never hear that preached? Because it doesn't fit religion.
Impamvu mbaye mvuga gutyo ko
doesn't fit religion. Paul says, what I will to do, I don't do. What I hate to do, that's what I'm doing.
Ibyo nshaka gukora sibyo nkora. Ibyo nanga gukora nibyo nkora.
And I think there's a lot of people that could be Christian except they heard, you're a bad person because you did that. You can't be a part of this church. And Paul says, that's me. I hate it, but I do it.
Hari abantu benshi baba baraje mu ikanisa bumvise amakuru y'uko ibyo bashaka gukora atari ibyo bakora n'ibyo banga gukora akaba ari ibyo bakora. Pawulo akavuga ngo niwe ubu.
Verse 16. But if I do the very thing I do not will or choose to do,
ariko ubwo nkora ibyo ndashaka.
So is Paul saying, I am doing things that my will did not choose to do. Then I agree with the law that the law is good. Okay? So he's talking about Moses' law there. So he says, my will agrees with Moses' law, but what I do does not agree with my will or with Moses' law. Well, then who's doing it? If Paul is doing it, but he doesn't want to do it, who's doing it? Are you getting the logic of that? Says, I do this, but I don't want to. Then why is he doing it? He says this. So now, no longer am I the one that's doing it, but sin that lives in me. Now, how would that work in the biggest famous churches of the world if one of the pastors was found drunk or he went to a prostitute or something and the pastor said, I hate what I did? Would anybody believe him? No.
Aramutse akoze ikosa akamuzoga cyangwa akaja kuri maraya akabanga binakoze sinarimbisha zomugendekera gutura.
I'm not saying that sin is okay. I'm not saying that. You will never hear me say that sin is okay.
But
it's wrong to punish somebody for something that he does not have enough power to defeat himself. And that's what Paul is saying. Verse 18. For I know that nothing good lives in me. Now, how many of the religious leaders you know, how many of them know this? That there's nothing good in me.
If
there's nothing good in Paul, then there's nothing good in us either. So why do I think if I punish Chubehiro, now some good will come out? Paul says, there's nothing good in me. In 1 Timothy 1, what does Paul call himself? The worst sinner. Okay, I know that nothing good lives in me. That is, in my flesh. So religion is trying to force the flesh to make itself better, but it's impossible. That's what Colossians says. That's what Romans 7 says. It's impossible.
idini riza rigerageza kubwira kamere ngo ibe nziza ariko ibintu bidashoboka.
Now listen, second part of verse 18. For the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not.
Ariko tachiza kimbamo. Pora nifuza gukora icyiza ariko kugikora ntabwo.
Verse 19, for the good that I will. Now my translation says want, but that's not the Greek. The good that I will, that I decide, I do not do.
Ibyiza nshaka gukora sibyo nkora.
But I practice, I keep on doing, not just one time, I keep on doing the very evil that I do not will to do.
Ahubwo ikibi nanga akaba ari cyo nkora.
Verse 20, but if I am doing the very thing I do not will to do,
Ari kubwo nkora ibyo nanga,
I am no longer the one doing it,
sinjuba nkibikora,
but sin which lives in me.
ahubwo n'icyaha kimbamo.
Now, how many times is somebody who's a member of a church or attending a church caught in a sin and brought in the front, and he has to confess his sin and he has to repent of his sin, and he gets shamed and rejected for his sin?
Ni kangahe mu ikanisa abantu baza bakora amakosa barangiza bakabwirwa ngo nibaze imbere y'abantu bavuga amakosa bako.
So the person gets punished, but Paul said the person isn't the one that's doing it, it's the sin that is in him that is doing it.
Ntahora rimwe karavuga ngo sibo wakoze iryo kosa ahubwo ikibi kimuba muri cyo cyakoze.
How do we get the sin that's in somebody out of them?
Ni gute dukura icyaha kiri mu?
Is there any human being that doesn't have sin in them?
Hari umuntu udafite icyaha muri ndani?
Yes, Mary, the mother of Jesus, immaculate conception. She doesn't have any sin in her, but she's the only human.
Umuntu wenyine udafite icyaha ni Mariya.
It's not true. She's a sinner the same as we are. So is the Pope, a sinner the same as we are. Okay, now verse 21. Then that's the last. We'll end then.
Yeah.
I find then a principle, but the Greek word is law. Does yours say law?
Law.
Okay. I find then a law.
Nuko rero mbona yuko amategeko.
Now I thought the laws were things I'm supposed to do or not supposed to do, but Paul says there's another law inside me, and that is that evil is present in me.
Nuko rero mbona yuko amategeko anyifuriza gukora ibyiza.
So if Paul was caught in a sin, he could say, I'm obeying the law.
Niba Pawulo afashwe yakoze icyaha, biba bigaragara ko yumviye amategeko.
Because Paul says he has the law of sin inside himself. So when he sins, he's obeying the law of sin.
Kuko nimba afite icyaha muri we, yemejanyije n'amategeko.
Did you know there's a law of sin, a law that commands you to sin?
Muzi ko hari amategeko y'icyaha.
You may not know it, but every one of us has that inside us. It came to us from Adam. And when the egg in our mother and the sperm from our father united inside our mother, from that second on, the law of sin was inside us. Paul knows that.
Pawulo yararizi no kuba ngo umuntu mu gusamwa akiri urusoro no kuba ngo cyaha ryategeko ry'icyaha aba ryakiriye. Pawulo yarazi neza.
But these flesh human messengers, leaders, teachers who teach us the will religion, they don't know what Paul knows, and they don't know what God knows, and they destroy people because they don't know.
Aba bantu rero twavugaga b'idini bakoresha ibintu by'umubiri ntibazi ibyo Pawulo azi, ntibazi iby'Imana izi, ahubwo ibyo bakora barimbura cyangwa se barangiza baronona ubuzima bw'abantu.
So verse 21, we'll read the whole verse this time. I find then the law that evil is present in me, the one who wants or wills to do good.
Nuko rero mbona yuko amategeko anyifuriza gukora ibyiza nyamara ibibi bikaba ari byo bintanga imbere.
Now, my question is, why do we punish that person?
ikibazo nakwibaza uyu munsi niki gituma duhanurira mu
We punish that person, but there's a law in him that is stronger than him. So why do we punish him?
harimo itegeko ry'icyaha rikomeye gusumba uriya muntu kubera iki tumuhana.
That's really sad.
Birababaje rero guhanura.
And I think there's probably people walking on the street out here that have been punished by religious people, and they are not willing to listen to the gospel now because they think the religion, the flesh religion that they were punished under is Christianity. It is not. It is not.
Hano hanze hari abantu bakomerekejwe bavuye mu idini barasohoka barahunga kubera ko bashinjwe birukanwe bashinjwe kubyo bananiwe bakanahana. Uyu munsi bakaba atababaza ngo bategere ubutumwa bwiza kubera ukuntu bahuye n'ibintu bibaca intege bakirukana.
PDF file, but 11 different translations of Colossians 2:23 because religious people don't like to admit what it says here.
Nababwiye ko mfite amaversion 18 avuga hejuru y'ino murongo mu Bakolosayi igice cya 2:23 no kuba ngo simbivuze byose ariko umuntu yaba bishaka nabimuhereza ka PDF akabireba ayo maversion yose bavuze ibintu bitandukanye.
Excuse me, we didn't finish verse 23. These are all matters to be sure that have the appearance of wisdom in will worship, will religion,
Ibyo bisa nkaho ari iby'ubwenge
and self-abasement, sacrificing myself.
N'ahari iby'ubwenge kugira ngo abantu bihimbire,
and severe, harsh treatment of the body.
bihimbira uburyo bwo gusenga bigire nkabicisha bugufi.
Now that sounds like a lot of people that are religious teachers that I know. Harsh treatment of the body.
Bigo nk'iby'umubiri.
But listen, but are of no value against the flesh.
Nyamara nta mumaro bigira na hato.
I'd like to know how yours translates that.
Nta mumaro bigira na hato wo kurwanya irari ry'umubiri. It has no value against the flesh.
Does it say the flesh or does it say indulgence or something?
Kurwanya irari ry'umubiri.
I'd like to know exactly what it says because these 11 different translations all say different.
The desires of the flesh. They have
okay, now, good. So, what does the desire of the flesh mean?
Okay, yaravuze ngo ibyifuzo by'umubiri ni ibihe?
Sin. Like a prostitute or drugs or something, right? I think that's what most people think when they think of the desires of the flesh. That's not what it's talking about. This is talking about the pride that says, I don't need Jesus on the cross completely because my will help me do good religious things. That's what this is talking about. This is not talking about behavior sins. This is talking about unbelief.
Nukuvuga ngo kurwanya tibigira umumaro wo kurwanya irari ry'umubiri ntabwo ari irari ry'umubiri abantu bazavuga ngo ubusambanyi n'ibindi ahubwo tibigira umumaro wo kurwanya imitekerereze y'umuntu nono iryo rari ry'umubiri bari kuvuga ni ubwibone ni ukwishira hejuru
Okay, what the Greek says, all of these religious laws all of them have no value against satisfying the flesh. The main issue of the flesh is I don't really need Jesus on the cross because by my will I will do good things and I will reduce sinning or stop sinning and then I'll go to heaven.
Ikintu gikomeye mu kijanye n'umubiri cyangwa idini nukwanga Yesu nukumuhakana ukavuga ngo jewe ndagerageza nkore ibyiza ko ubushake bwanje cyangwa amahitamo yanje kugira ngo nzoje ku.
But Paul says all of these religious laws are will religion. human messenger religion that results in the worship of human people instead of the true God.
Pawulo aravuga ngo ibyo ngibyo ni umubiri, ni idini, ni ukuramya abantu.
What do you think is the main thing the flesh wants to do?
Niki mutekereza cyane umubiri ukenera gukora cyane mu mubiri niki? Umubiri cyangwa se kamere y'umuntu cyane cyane igishaka gukora niki?
That's the same for every human being.
Nukuba mucyo ni kimwe ku
man or woman.
Yaba ari umugabo,
no matter what country, no matter what skin color, no matter what culture, it's the same in every human being.
Ni kimwe ku bantu bose.
What do you think it is? The main flesh issue.
Ikintu kijanye n'umubiri.
That's what Paul's talking about here.
Ikintu kijanye n'umubiri.
But I haven't sat under you, but I have never heard in any church I attended that they talked about this. That's a mistake.
Sinumva mu ikanisa bavuga iki kintu.
What is the main issue with the flesh? The main problem.
Ikibazo gikomeye cyane mu mubiri ni iki?
Satan said you can be like God.
Ni Satani ko.
Yeah, but it's pride. But it's the pride of.
Ni Satani kubwira umuntu ngobera nk'Imana.
It's the pride of I don't need Jesus on the cross because I'm doing good things myself. You bad people, you might need Jesus on the cross, but I don't. Because I'm better than those bad people out there. My will is better than theirs. The main issue of the flesh is I can do it. I can be like God. That's the main issue. And it's in all of you. It's in all of us. That is the main issue. But Satan is very clever. So Satan, who brought that first lie and uses it to control people, and uses it to pull people away from Jesus, the true God, and the greatest thing that ever happened in all time, his death on the cross. He says the issue is your will. If you decide I'm not going to do that bad thing, then you won't do it. What does Paul say? Paul says, I did decide not to do it, but I did it. I don't want to do it, but I did it. You say that in a lot of churches, it'll get you kicked out. That's what the Bible says. And so Satan makes us so focused on behavior that the gospel is omitted. So Paul is saying all these laws, all this self-sacrifice, all of this doing our level best, is no value against the flesh that's in us. Because we're missing the point. We're missing the point. The point is, do I believe in Jesus on the cross or not? Do I think I can save myself by doing good things, confessing my sins, repenting of my sins, getting baptized, good behavior? No kizwa n'imyitwarire yaje no kwigomwa ibi nibi. All of that is flesh. All of that is flesh. All of that is against the truth. All of that is against Jesus and the cross. Although flesh religion likes to talk about Jesus and the cross, doesn't really believe it. Doesn't really believe it. Okay.